Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Latest Chelsea news in today's video, and it's all about, as you can see by the title, Erling Haaland and Chelsea's willingness and attempt to sign the striker this summer in an amazing transfer deal. We'll get into that straight away. I think the implications of it, how serious is it? Mino Raiola's involvement in this transfer as well, and sort of moving forward into the summer, because I think trying to sign a player of this caliber like last summer, I think is interesting to discuss, even if the transfer doesn't happen, because it's a massive deal if it was to come off. But before we get into any of that Haaland stuff, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, hit that like button if you're enjoying the content, because it helps out the channel as well. Free uploads today. Let's Talk Chelsea, added time answering your questions. And then tonight, my Leicester versus Chelsea preview. So busy day on the channel. So make sure you're hitting that notification bell so you don't miss any of the uploads today. But this came out from Simon Johnson in The Athletic in David Ornstein's piece this morning about transfer news and speculation. Chelsea willing to break their club record to try and sign Erling Haaland this summer. Chelsea will make a big push to sign Erling Haaland from Borussia Dortmund this summer, even though his release clause doesn't come into effect until 2022, reports Simon Johnson. The Athletic has been assured that Chelsea are determined to bring a top striker to Stamford Bridge at the end of the season, and that Haaland is the player they want. The 20-year-old has scored a remarkable 35 goals in just 35 appearances since joining Borussia Dortmund from Salzburg 12 months ago. Haaland is on the wish list of a number of top clubs across Europe, but sources have told The Athletic that Chelsea are going to do their utmost to get him to move to Stamford Bridge instead. Haaland has a release clause in his contract worth 75 million euros, about 66 million pounds, which can't be triggered until the end of the 21-22 campaign. They will also face a number of further obstacles, including trying to negotiate with his agent Mino Raiola, who angered them when they missed out on Romelu Lukaku to Man United in 2017. But Chelsea, who spent more than 200 million on 5 players in the 2020 summer transfer window, are keen to make more big buys in the close season. They need another centre forward, with Giroud expected to leave when his contract expires in the summer. Tammy Abraham has shown promise in the role, but Haaland is seen as the kind of target man that can take the club to another level and compete for the Premier League and Champions League. Before I give you my opinions, Liam Toomey, who also is at The Athletic reporting for Chelsea, referenced a lot of his articles. I just tweeted beyond this that your periodic reminder that reporting a club wants to sign a player is very different from reporting a club will sign a player. Haaland will almost certainly be sport for choice whenever he decides to leave Dortmund. There was a link about Haaland to Chelsea pre-Christmas that I spoke about on the channel, and thinking about this summer transfer window and how serious Chelsea are going to be, considering how much we spent in the last window. I think for me, this once again goes into the category that just Chelsea are not messing around anymore in terms of their targets. Now, you have to caveat this with saying it's just a link. It doesn't mean Chelsea are going to sign this player. There are so many clubs across Europe trying to get him. Compared to last summer, you think about Chelsea's successful pursuit of Kai Havertz. Will that change this summer, or will the pandemic once again affect certain clubs like Real Madrid, and that could help Chelsea trying to get Haaland in the door? Once again, I want to bring up Mino Raiola. I spoke about Donnarumma a few weeks back, another player linked with a summer move to Chelsea, and him being a Raiola player. Raiola is an interesting character, and I think pretty negative. I think in terms of the influence he can have over transfers. Chelsea know this with Lukaku, but I look at Paul Pogba at Man United recently. That's something that has to concern you, I think, when we look at player power and we look at the influence and the noises he makes. It feels like a pretty obvious link, and Chelsea are just a number of clubs that are going to be linked to him. I wouldn't be at all surprised if I start hearing reports about Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner being unhappy at Stamford Bridge after this report. It's just typical stuff. It's influence from agents in the game now. You have to understand that. And, would you make that sort of, not sacrifice, but the price you pay for having a Raiola player at Chelsea and sort of dealing with him? And then beyond that, sort of his constant noises in the media, if a player isn't playing well or having struggles at a club. Man United have suffered from this recently, and that's something to consider as well. He's an incredible forward. He's one of the best in world football. There's no denying that. Just looking at his goal return, it's absolutely ridiculous considering he's 20 years old. 19 goals in 17 17 appearances so far this season for Borussia Dortmund. The ability of him to be so clinical and deadly in the box. I mean, Chelsea, something we've struggled with over a number of years is our ability to finish chances. You think about Timo Werner's inability to finish chances at the moment. You look at Haaland, he does feel like a bit of an anomaly player, you know, a bit like an Mbappe, you know, someone who's just absolutely ridiculous in front of goal, is sort of boasting just alien levels of clinicalness in front of goal. I mean, it is ridiculous what he's doing week in, week out. Will that drop over time, or will that only get better? That's the scary thought as well, and that's why so many clubs want him. It's another Borussia Dortmund sort of masterstroke in the sense of buying an impressive young player. That's Dortmund's continued policy, and they get it right over and over again. You know, Chelsea signing Christian Pulisic for 60 million a few years ago. You think about Jadon Sancho at the moment. Whenever he leaves Borussia Dortmund, which I think will be soon, will be upwards of 100 million. So that's how they make their funds. That's how they're able to continue to improve the first team squad. And if he goes before that release clause this summer, it's going to be probably upwards of 100 million, I think, in this current market. And especially given what Haaland can give you potentially as a striker, it's going to be like that. So absolutely, it would be breaking the club record. I felt that Chelsea would break the club record for Kai Havertz. That didn't happen. It was a little bit below that. But I especially think for Haaland, goals, for instance, it's going to go up there, absolutely. So it would be ridiculous. And it's interesting to see that Chelsea, even though they spent so much in the last window, are looking to recruit bigger. Once again, we spoke about Upamecano last week. Could he be a potential centre-back target? We know about Chelsea and Lampard's interest in Declan Rice. Could that be another player Chelsea are intrigued by? It's very interesting to look beyond this now and sort of see the culture shift, or sort of the mindset shift of Chelsea in the transfer market, and sort of how serious they're going to be. They're not just looking at last summer. That's not going to be an anomaly. They want to be serious once again. They want to back the current vision, whether, you know, Frank Lampard's future, of course, has been discussed in recent weeks, but just in the sense of growing this squad and getting it better and better, trying to get us back to the top of the Premier League. Now, I do want to go with the other side of this, and it's the first thing that came to mind when I read this report, other than it being, you know, how true it is, how serious Chelsea actually are. You know, there are a number of clubs in for Haaland, and sort of obviously they are for his talent. But then I look at the current first team squad and I think about, firstly, Timo Werner, 23, 24. We just spent 50 million on him. And in that report from Simon Johnson, apparently Chelsea absolutely believe in Timo Werner, and absolutely they should. You know, we're only 5-6 months into his Chelsea career, not even half a season into his first season at Stamford Bridge. I think that player will come good. You've spent so much on him potentially leading the line. Tammy Abraham being a young player that could turn out to be an amazing forward. I think he's been quite impressive this season, given he's not always been the first choice striker. This is something you need to consider, and it's a point I want to make because I think people have made it before about Chelsea, and I think it's very easy to sit on conflicting sides of an argument, right, and be quite hypocritical in this sense. I think if you want Erling Haaland, and why wouldn't you, considering the ability of this player in front of goal, then you can't moan if Tammy Abraham decides to move on at the end of his contract and becomes an amazing striker somewhere else. You know, that's the conflict and that's the sort of sacrifice you have to make, right? And that's something Chelsea have done in the past with the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, you know, thinking about bringing in a flashy new signing. Now, bringing in Haaland at 20, if he turns out to be as good as he is now consistently over his career, you're setting up your squad with the other players we've already invested in for the next decade. You really are. It would be absolutely ridiculous in terms of the strength and depth Chelsea would have, especially in attacking areas for the long term. But I feel like Tammy Abraham, who is yet to sign that new contract that's been going on for probably nearly a year now in terms of extending that contract, I can understand why Tammy's sort of hesitant to do so, because he's not always first choice under Lampard. He saw Timo Werner come in. If he sees Erling Haaland come in, he's going to think to himself, well, I love this club. Sometimes I can be really good for Chelsea. I can get in the first team. I can prove my worth, but I'm never going to be considered the first choice. And he's older than Haaland, and he may think to himself, with potential suitors in the Premier League, I'm sure, who would look at his goal return and think, we'll bring you in to solve our striking problems. I think Tammy would be looking elsewhere. I think there's a lot of judgment on Tammy Abraham at the moment. And I think that usually people bring up Mbappe, they bring up Haaland, for instance. These are anomaly young players. They are not the norm. And Tammy Abraham, for me, a bit like Lukaku, could turn out to be an amazing striker in a few years. And it's always that conflict for Chelsea now of wanting that instant success or sort of building behind a young player. And that's something that's going to be conflicting. And you're going to see, and, you know, if you want the level of Chelsea to be very high, which I think a lot of us do because we want to see Chelsea get back to the top of the Premier League, there are going to be casualties. And that doesn't mean that Tammy Abraham is, you know, deserving of just a starting spot because he's a young player. Absolutely not. But I think that, you know, if he does turn into an amazing striker, would he be another one Chelsea Chelsea let go too soon. And I just can't see a situation, maybe for a season, we could have a situation where Timo Werner, Tammy Abraham and Erling Haaland are our strikers, but I think beyond that, I think one of those something would have to give there, absolutely, given the ages of all these players. You know, the good thing about having, say, Olivier Giroud at the moment as an older striker is he can sort of understand being maybe second choice at times and having to rest him at certain periods in the season. When you have players 22, 24, 20 years old, they're not just going to sit around for years and years, especially with the talent Chelsea have now in attack. So I think it's unrealistic to expect that Chelsea for the long term would have all those three strikers. You also think about the funds needed to sign a player like Erling Haaland and other players as well. Chelsea need to sell a lot of players. It's something I spoke about recently and stressed. You look at a number of players I could bring up in the first team squad who could be making a move in the summer. Kepa Arrizabalaga, Andreas Christensen, Antonio Rudiger, could both of them leave? Emerson, Marcos Alonso, Jorginho, even maybe potentially Mateo Kovacic. I think Kovacic will stay another season, but there are other players as well on loan. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Ross Barkley. God, there are so many. Olivier Giroud could be leaving as well. I know you're not going to get a massive fee for him. He's just going to leave at the end of his contract potentially. There's so many players in this first team that are either surplus to requirements, don't look like they have a long-term future at a club, and could gain Chelsea a profit in the transfer market. And that's where Chelsea could earn enough funds in terms of selling players to bring in a player like Haaland in the summer. It's going to ramp up over the upcoming months. And as was stressed by Liam Toomey, very right, that this does not mean Chelsea are signing Erling Haaland in the summer. And don't come away from this video despite my skepticism over, say, Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner and Chelsea sort of policy. It is a bit confusing to me. You invest so much on Tammy Abraham, you invest so much, especially on Timo Werner, and in a season later you go and spend even bigger money on another striker. I don't know what signal that sends to those strikers in a sense, and sort of the transfer policy, and you know, would that maybe be a detriment to other areas Chelsea need to focus on? Because we've done a lot of the major squad building now. It's just about maybe adding layers onto that as well. But I understand the excitement absolutely of a player like Haaland. His potential, his current hit rate in front of goal is absolutely astonishing. And if he was to sign for Chelsea, that would raise eyebrows just like our recruitment last summer. Let me know your opinions on this developing story in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this episode of Let's Talk Chelsea. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonofChelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.